All right, it is 9:30, and we're going to get started with our first panel of the day, Marathon Training Principles, a conversation with Andrew Kastor. Before we get started, I just want to welcome everybody here to the 2024 California International Marathon, day 2 of our expo. We've had great speaker panels yesterday, and we're excited to kick off day number 2 here. Expo just opened at 9 o'clock. Welcome. And one good thing first let me introduce myself. My name is Scott Abbott. I'm the executive director of the Sacramento Running Association. We're the organization that puts on the California International Marathon. So I'm very excited. This is a big weekend for our organization, and we've been planning all year for this event. And so thank you for joining us. One of the great things I'm happy to announce, I know we've all been refreshing our screens on our computer for the last 10 days, but the weather looks beautiful tomorrow. So I know that's one source of anxiety that we can all put to bed. It's going to be a beautiful day on the streets of Sacramento, and I wish everybody luck. As I said, the topic today is Marathon Training Principles. I'm here with Andrew Kastor. Andrew Kastor is the coach of the Mammoth Track Club. He's coached some of the best marathoners in the world, some of the top American marathoners, including tutoring Dina Kastor, who won a Olympic bronze medal in 2004 at the Athens Olympics, and then went on to break the American record in the marathon. So he has coached some of the best marathoners in the world, but he's also written the book on marathon running. He's authored 2 books on marathon running, including Marathoners for Beginners, so first-timers too. So I'd actually is there anybody here running their first marathon with us at CIM? Yes, let's give her a round of applause. First marathon. Welcome to Crazy Town. How many of you guys are running your first CIM? Awesome. Okay, so we got a lot of people excited for their first CIM. And I know there's a lot of anxieties right now as you're getting ready for race day, and we've had a lot of panels trying to help you tomorrow on the race, in terms of fueling and hydration panels. We've had a few expert panels. Today, we're just going to be talking about general marathon training principles, best practices in marathon training. But Andrew, before we get started, maybe is there any general thoughts you can have for everybody with their maybe anxieties about tomorrow and activating all the work that they've done to have a great day tomorrow? Let's just start generally there, and then we'll dive into training.
Yeah, well, so Scott mentioned that the weather is going to be, very nice and conducive for running tomorrow. I went out there this morning, ran at exactly race time. I was out there at 7 o'clock this morning, kind of wishing I was going to be running tomorrow in these really great conditions. So starting off just with, it's going to be very conducive for having a good experience tomorrow, whether you just want to get to the finish line or whether you want to run a fast time, a Boston qualifier, a personal best, or whatever. So let's just kind of work backwards from the weather. But as far as tomorrow goes, everything is done. The only thing that you can do now is stay relaxed, converse with family and friends, watch a funny movie this afternoon, make sure that you're eating something that you normally eat before a long training run, and really just kind of enjoy and celebrate. If my wife was sitting here on the couch with us, she'd be telling you all to just go out there and celebrate. This is a celebration of your fitness, a celebration of training with, thousands of new friends. So just have a great time tomorrow. Just try to stay relaxed as you can. Even having a spotty night's sleep this evening is totally fine. If you've been sleeping sleeping well all week, then tonight, it's not so much hypercritical that you get a really good night's sleep. You're going to be getting up early anyway, 3:30, 4 o'clock in order to catch buses. Just go ahead and just be relaxed today. I'm glad to see all of you sitting down and resting your legs for tomorrow. So those people standing in the background, if you're coming or going, choose. We've got some seats right here that you want to sit down and listen to our chat. So that's my advice for tomorrow. And just, and one last thing, when you do get to the finish line here at the Capitol, make sure you put your arms up and celebrate. I have seen so many times athletes stop and pausing their watches and they get that finish line photo. Scott and his team has thousands of dollars worth of timing equipment, they will get your time. So make sure you put your arms up and you celebrate.
That's actually great advice. Nobody has given advice in the panel before. It's so good. The finish line where, people, looking at their, like, take a moment to celebrate that, all that work you've done and the accomplishment, that hero's welcome at the finish line. That's the spoils. So yes, celebrate that, get your arms in the air and get a picture that'll last a lifetime. So thank you for that. So then we're going to dive into just talking marathon training. Like I said, Andrew wrote the book on marathon training. Let's start with Monday. They're going to run a marathon. So let's just start with the recovery from this marathon and some tips to just kind of get that one put to bed for their body and recover to get ready to jump back into training for whatever the next thing is. So let's start with recovery.
Yeah, there's a few phases to marathon training, and you want to start a marathon training program or plan well rested. Well rested after your last race, well rested after your last marathon. A marathon does a lot of damage to the body. We're doing something almost superhuman tomorrow, where you have muscle damage, you have hormone depletion, glycogen depletion, lots of inflammation going on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe into Thursday, which is completely fine. That's all normal. But you want to make sure that you respect and honor the travel here. I mean, if you're out of the state, or I drove 4 hours last night from my hometown in Mammoth Lakes, California. I drove 4 hours here, driving back on Sunday afternoon. But you got to honor and respect the travel, and also honor and respect the training for the last 16 to 20 weeks that you've been doing for this race. You've been depleting your hormones. You've been pushing the pause button on maybe social activities, getting up early. How many people get up early to do their run before work or before getting the kids off to school? I mean, I have a child that I have to get off to 8th grade every morning. So I get my marathon training in, or my training in, early in the morning. It takes a little bit for your body to catch back up. Okay. So you want to start your marathon training, the next one, marathon training program, well rested, and make sure that your body has healed and recovered hormonally, emotionally, physically, and all that. So starting on Monday, I suggest taking 1 to 2 complete weeks off of running. You can do some cross training, allow your body to heal before you start that next phase of your marathon buildup.
So 1 to 2 weeks off of running. Okay. And then the phase back in at that point, what are you looking at in terms of jumping back into running?
So after 1 to 2 weeks off of taking a rest break, maybe doing some spinning on the bike, getting in the pool, splashing around a little bit, I recommend just easing back into it and really starting your aerobic base training for 3 to 5 weeks. You're just trying to get your mileage back up into the 20s, into the 30s, maybe into the 40s, depending on your experience level. So it's just easing back into it. And then once you've comfortably gotten back up to right around where your taper was for your mileage, when you get into that area, that zone, you want to start progressing into that longer running. You're running more frequently. You're running 4 or 5, maybe 6 days a week at that point. So we're talking after Monday, we're talking, mid-January, late January, where you're starting to get a bulk of your mileage in.
Yeah, so one thing we skipped over because I wanted to ask you about was in those 3 to 5 days after the race when, stairs are hard, right? Going to the bathroom is hard. I mean, you're just blown up, right? With soreness. What are from a food perspective, but then also maintenance perspective, what things you can do to kind of try? I mean, it's going to be bad one way or the other, but how do you mitigate that recovery? What are the things you should be doing? Across the finish line, are there things they can do to kind of mitigate that recovery?
Yeah, continue to treat your body well. You're in this vulnerable state, where when you have a big, hard, long run like tomorrow or during training, your immune system is compromised for about 12 to 24 hours. So you're more susceptible to colds or getting sick. So you want to treat your body well. So in those 3 to 4 days after the marathon, you're getting in good nourishment. You're still eating very healthfully, Maybe you can celebrate with a beer. Obviously, that's fun. But make sure you're treating your body well. Go ahead and get a massage. I would say, maybe 3 to 4 days out from the marathon. Usually, after I run a marathon, I'm usually pretty sore for 3 to 4 days, and I don't want anybody touching my legs for at least that amount of time. But also sleeping well, getting back into a routine, and just really treating yourself, gently and kind of baby yourself to make sure you recover well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So we're basically talking recovery there, 3 to 5 days of soreness, treating your body well, moving on, and then that 1 to 2 weeks of no running, then the phase back in, kind of getting your mileage back up to where you were at the taper, which was this past 2 weeks or so for you. And so then now it's time, and CIM always comes at an interesting time where in December, and I think psychologically everyone kind of turns the calendar and then they start looking at 2025. What am I going to do in 2025? What races am I going to run? What's my next marathon? And I'm going to come back to CIM, of course, but before CIM, what's my next marathon? And so in terms of planning that, like what should they kind of be targeting for their kind of next, in terms of what the buildup will be? So when they start planning their 2025, how should that look for them?
Yeah, I'm sure many of you are already having, plans for 2025. You're applying to races well before this race. But in terms of aiming for your next big event, I'm always a big fan of running 2 to 3 marathons in a calendar year. I know many people do more than that. Some people do fewer, obviously, but having that time to regenerate. And I see the long game when it comes to marathon running and keeping this as a routine, as a lifestyle, going into my 50s and into my 60s in a few years. But having that long game and having the ability to recover. Now, these new shoes that have come out with the cushion, the carbon plates, they're allowing for athletes such as yourself to run multiple marathons in a calendar year, to run 2 or 3 in the spring, maybe 2 in the fall. So athletes are getting in more marathons than when I first came into the sport, 25 years ago. So there's that element, but making sure that you keeping those same principles of recovery moving into your next marathon buildup. And the marathon buildups can be condensed from the standard typical 18, 20 week, 22 weeks. They can be condensed into 12, 14 weeks, but allowing enough time for that recovery in your body to regenerate and for your mind to relax and build up for the next one. So just kind of be patient.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I know we had someone here that's running their first marathon. I think people that get ready for that first marathon are maybe going from a couch to a marathon program or something. They might take that 18 to 20 weeks. But now if you're rolling into a second marathon, you don't need to start at square one and go 18 to 20 weeks. You have all this work in your system. And
you got to remember that the marathon is a stimulus, just like the training. Your body's going to adapt to the stimulus tomorrow morning, but it may take a while. It may take another week for your body actually to recover and grow stronger from the marathon. So you can use the marathons if you're running multiple marathons within a year. You can use those marathons as a great training run for the next training cycle as well. Just making sure that you honor that muscle damage and that hormone depletion and all the psychological and emotional energy that you sink into the marathon training.
Yeah, so let's look at what that marathon buildup looks like. And maybe let's just use, obviously I know everyone might be looking at, we said that next marathon in the spring, but let's just use, because the common thing that everyone has here is CIM. Let's look at like a CIM buildup, a marathon. How do you want that buildup to look, working back from a December date? So what does the marathon buildup look like?
Yeah, so using CIM as an example, Sunday in December, you're starting to look at building your marathon in August. During the summer months, you're building consistency. You're staying in that aerobic zone, and when you get into September and October, you're really ramping up your volume. You're ramping up your mileage. You're getting in your long runs. And you're also training your gut, on the long runs, the 18 milers, the 16 milers, the 20 milers, maybe 20 plus milers of which you might do 3 or 4 during a training cycle, you're training your gut, you're training your mind to go that distance, to be able to concentrate for 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours in a training run. But you want to practice your race nutrition with precision coming in here, making sure that your gut knows what to do with those carbohydrates, those electrolytes, the fluids coming in. So you're really rehearsing as much as you can, once a week, once every 2 weeks, you're rehearsing the amount of calories that you think you'll need, between 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. That's kind of the goal. If you talk to the guys and ladies over at Precision, they'll advise you on when to drink. I think there's 17 aid stations along the course tomorrow. So it's a dress rehearsal. Each weekend or every other weekend is really a dress rehearsal for the main event, for the peak race. And I think it's important to start that in the summertime. 1st of August. I didn't do my math going back 20 weeks from tomorrow, but I think that's sometime in August. But really starting that build up then, and having a good base of volume, 20, 30, 40 miles before you actually ramp up into your marathon training, your 16, 18, 20 week marathon training.
So what are the key building blocks in that marathon? Like obviously long run, speed work. Like what are those pieces that should be in all marathon training plans? Right.
Yeah. So it's going through the different phases of the marathon training buildup. You have your general mileage or your general fitness type of runs where it's just 4, 6, 8 miles at a very easy aerobic pace. And then once you get to that 16-week mark before the marathon, that's when you start increasing your Sunday long run or your weekly long run by about 2 miles. You're increasing that time in that aerobic zone. You're strengthening your legs. You're developing that concentration, being able to concentrate for that 2 hours, that 3 hours, that 4 hours that you're running. And that all takes time. And I'm always blown away that when I start my marathon training and I do my first 2 hour long run, and that's probably about 1 to 2 minutes slower per mile than my goal race pace.
Okay, so long runs 1 to 2 minutes slower than your goal race pace.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to stay in that aerobic zone. You want to try and develop your marathon pace runs in shorter bouts, 6 miles, 8 miles, 10 miles, and I usually do those on Fridays. But when I'm preparing for my long runs, I'm like, I see on my calendar, I have to do a 2 hour long run. And my last long run was maybe an hour 40, hour 30. And that's a stretch, not just for my body, it's a stretch for my mind to be able to concentrate for that long. And then once I do it, I adapt, my mind adapts, my body adapts. The next time I go out, I do a 2 hour, 15-minute long run, and that's another stress. But when I do my maintenance run or my building block runs throughout the week, my shorter 45 minutes, my shorter hour runs, they feel so easy. They feel so short because my mind has adapted to concentrating for that long. So that's part of the psychological aspect of marathon training, is not just training your body, but also training your mind to be patient. That's one thing that we learn through marathon training, is being very patient. I know being patient with my 13-year-old daughter, marathon training comes in very handy for that sometimes, as my wife and I are experiencing. But to have that patience, to be able to get those endorphins. We get those endorphins from running over 1 hour. We get the serotonin and the endorphins that help mitigate discomfort along the way. And those endorphins are very addicting, which is why I think we're all here today.
So let's stick with the long run right now. The long run progression, you mentioned an important term, adaptation. I think that's like the magic of marathon training. Our body adapts. I know some of you guys start that training plan and like, wow, an 8 mile long run, this just seems really, really difficult. And then, 10 weeks later, it's like, 16 miles, no problem. So what does that long run progression look like? Is that, you mentioned something about 2 miles or and you're also talking minutes there. Is that just a basic progressive step ladder, or is it kind of an up down thing, or how do you like to see those long run progressions work?
Yeah, exactly. Great question. When I coach my athletes, I coach international athletes, I coach recreational athletes, I coach elite athletes, and I go with miles, Ks, and minutes, depending on the psychology of the person, which one's better for which athlete. So when I'm progressing after that 16 weeks out mark, I start progressing that weekly long run by either 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or by 2 miles. And as Scott mentioned, do you stagger that? How does that build? Is it linear? There's periodization inside the marathon training block. And I go every other week. I'll increase the long run. I like to have a long run up, a long build up towards the marathon. It gives me plenty of time for an athlete to help adapt to the stimulus. So every other weekend will be increased by 15 minutes or 20 minutes or by 2 miles. And the weeks in between, I have a combination or a marathon simulation run where we'll start off easy for the first half and then get down close to marathon pace for the second half as well. So it kind of flip-flops. So it's 2 different stimulus every other week. That's how I strategize most plans.
So you're building every other week, that increasing that long run, and then the in between, you're kind of playing with pace a little bit. And okay, that's great. That's an interesting approach there and then just building those both adaptations, the resistance to the pace, and then also building up the amount of time on your feet and that as well. Okay. So the other piece of the puzzle is, I think, is a lot of people talk about speed work. That's this general all-encompassing term. But when you're putting together your marathon training, how important is speed work or different types of training more than just running? Just putting in miles.
Yeah, we're looking for efficiency out there. We're looking for efficiency in terms of biomechanical efficiency, running form, your running mechanics. But we're also looking for cellular physiology efficiency too. So doing speed work, anybody familiar with Bart Yasso? Anybody ever hear of Bart Yasso? He developed this great speed session with 800 meters. You get up to 10 by 800 meters on a track or on a road, and you take equal recovery between your 800s. And if you're running consistent 330s for 800 meters, it's a very good predictor of what you can do for the marathon. Only if you're doing marathon training volume, of course. If you're doing your weekly long runs of 2 hours, 3 hours, 3.5 hours. But it's a great way to kind of calibrate about a ballpark figure of where your marathon time should be when you finish. Okay. So when I do my Yasso 800s, I try to run about 315, 320, and it usually equals out to about a 315 or 320 a marathon later in the training cycle. So that's a bit of an example of a speed session. I do mile repeats, that VO2 max work. VO2 max work is anything from 2 minutes to about 6 minutes of work. So for most of us, that's half mile repeats, 1 kilometer repeats. If you're on the faster side, you're aiming for a sub 3 minute or 3 hour marathon, then that could be mile repeats as well. So you get cellular benefit and efficiency from doing the speed and muscular power. A lot of people, I think, forget that we are training the nervous system as well as the aerobic system, the anaerobic system, our fat metabolizing system, if you will. So we're training the nervous system. So the more times you get out there to run throughout the week, the better. The caveat is you want to stay healthy. So when my wife, Dina, was training for the Athens Marathon, the Athens Olympics in 2004, she was running 13 times a week. So twice a day, every day, except on Sunday. And that's when she would do her long run. So she was running 130, 140, 145 miles a week. She would basically roll out of bed, tired, exhausted, throw her shoes on, and she'd be half asleep. And she would get out there and she would do her training run. So she just did it all the time, no days off. she was napping 2 hours a day, sleeping 10 hours at night, and getting massage and body work about 5-6 hours a week. So the more you do it, the better, but there comes a price. You don't want to go overboard and get injured or get depleted. So I recommend running as frequently as possible, 6 days for most of us. 6 days is adequate. 5 to 6 days, I think, would be great. But the more you can stay in that aerobic zone, the better for the marathon. And the more your body and your nervous system can adapt to lifting your knees and toeing off the ground and swinging your arms.
I think it's a really good point you're just making, because I think a lot of times when we look at marathon training plans, everyone focuses on that long run, that weekly long run, and you start talking about working up to 16, 18, 20-mile long runs. But the frequency, you have to have enough other miles to support that. You can't just go out and run once a week and then maybe do a speed workout and then do this big long run on the weekend unless you're supporting that, but you're seeing it with a lot of other running. So
I rather see a higher volume week than a longer long run on Saturday or Sunday. That's the weekend warrior, right? Where they work all week and they have families and they go out there and they kill themselves on Saturday and Sunday. You get actually more benefit to running 6 days a week and running a shorter long run than doing just Saturday, Sunday work and then doing nothing the rest of the week. So I'm a big advocate for frequency of running, and the frequency of running requires a lot of dedication to those 16 to 20 weeks of marathon training, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that's where the nervous system comes in on the frequency side of things for sure. So yeah, we've got our long runs, we got our speed workouts, and then those, as you said, maintenance runs or those other building blocks pieces. Those are kind of the pieces of the puzzle here over 16 to 20 weeks. We talked about the adaptation that comes in from the long run progression. What about for people? I mean, we just kind of touched on it there. People, life gets in the way. You mentioned, Dina's lifestyle preparing for the Olympics. Obviously, that's not a reality for everybody here. So what happens when, like, the marathon training, maybe you can't follow the plan exactly, or it's not perfect? Like, what is the, what are the key kind of components that need to be in place, just in a realistic sense, managing life around marathon training?
Yeah. Training, a training schedule or a training plan never goes perfectly. I mean, it's very rare that it goes perfectly. We're going to pick up a cold. We have to deviate from our training program somehow, some way. But having that confidence and bouncing ideas off of maybe a coach or a friend, you can download these incredibly well thought out, methodical training plans online, Runner's World, other running websites where you can download a 16-week or a book, get a marathon book. But it's well thought out. It allows for adaptation. It allows for recovery. But what happens if you do get sick or you pick up a little bit of injury? Bouncing ideas off of a coach, bouncing ideas off of a running buddy, or if you belong to a running club, you have running partners, they can help reassure you that missing 1, 2, 3, or 4 days isn't going to be a big deal. And having that confidence to be able to lean on somebody or to have guidance from someone, I think is really crucial.
Yeah, and we talked about this yesterday in our panel, when you talk about a marathon training plan, and I use the analogy of putting together a puzzle. And if you're putting that together, and the goal is to ultimately, be able to see what the picture of the puzzle looks like, and not necessarily every piece needs to be in place. And so if you're putting together a puzzle of the Golden Gate Bridge, all of the runs that you do, all of the workouts, all the long runs are different pieces of that puzzle. And ultimately, if by the end of the training plan, you can tell it's the Golden Gate Bridge, you've prepared well for the marathon, even if, that one little bird up in the sky is missing or something like that. Now, if you stand back and you can't tell what it is, you probably haven't put in enough work. So it's really the totality of the work versus any one key run or one key long. I think a lot of people get anxious if they haven't run 20 miles or they haven't run 18, and maybe talk about that. Maybe there's some people here that have some anxieties over that, about the length of that long run, that longest long run? Does it have to be 20? Does it have to be 22? Can it be 18? Can it be 16? Like, to have a successful marathon, like, what is there a magic?
I think coming in well rested, even if you have some holes in your puzzle and some of the pieces are missing, if you come in well rested, the energy of the crowds, the cheer zones, the people at the aid stations, all the volunteers, the athletes around you will help carry you that distance. It might be challenging. It's going to be challenging the last half of the race if you do have some missing puzzle pieces, or maybe you didn't do your biggest long run, or maybe this is your second or third or fourth or multiple marathon. You can rely on that experience that you've had in the past. If it's your first marathon and you followed a training program and there are some holes in it, you can get inspiration from those around you. You can get inspiration from the volunteers out there, the ones handing you water, the one handing you fluids. So you can pull that inspiration. I think that's what people need to do tomorrow in order to get to Capital from Folsom. I think it doesn't have to go perfectly, the training plans. When training plans, sometimes that's usually when world records are broken, or the conditions are optimal. But to be able to get to the finish line, if you have any sort of doubts, I'll be happy to stay over after we finish talking here and maybe seek out some individual tips that I can help you with for tomorrow to get through the race.
Well, yeah, I do want to open up the questions here as well. So individual questions that people have, either about just tips from one of the best marathon coaches in the world here about their race tomorrow, or just about general training principles. So if you have questions, Steve's got a microphone, and raise your hand and we'll get to it. Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
If I'm not running during the week, but I'm playing sports, does that count to some training?
It does count. Yes, it does count. It may not be hyper specific to marathon running training, but if you're active through the week, if you're cycling, you belong to a soccer club, you're playing pickleball, if you're staying in that aerobic zone, your heart, your lungs, and your blood chemistry don't know the difference of what you're doing. It's just the nervous system of running repetitively, which helps get you to the finish line healthy and happy. But throughout the week, if you're doing something different, pick up basketball games or whatever, you're in that aerobic zone, you're sweating, you're getting your heart rate up, you're stimulating muscle tissue that might as well be lying dormant, not doing something. So yes, it does contribute, not hyper specifically, but it does contribute, so you can have some confidence going into a run, knowing that you're active all week, and then maybe you're marathon specific on race weekend.
Just a general question in terms of fitness after you've run your marathon. You mentioned about taking a week, 2 weeks off after your marathon. In terms of fitness loss, what do you think is like the recovery to get back to the fitness that you were? Do you lose a lot in the first 2 weeks, or is it worth ramping up again and trying to get that fitness back?
That's a great question, actually.
Yeah. Long term, I think the fitness benefits outweigh that short term loss. A lot of people have that misperception or anxiety. Did I lose too much? I take off too much time. Your body remembers. It'll take 2 or 3 weeks to feel like, oh yeah, this is back in my routine again. But that's going to help lengthen your marathon career and keep you happy and healthy going forward. I mean, I work with a lot of marathoners, and they want to turn around. I had a guy run Chicago, and then he wanted to turn around and run Philly. I said, and it was like maybe 5-6 weeks in between. I said, okay, we're going to do this, but we're going to do this my way. And you have to take off 1 week complete rest after Chicago. And he did. And he ended up PRing in Chicago and PRing in Philly. And boy, did I shut him down after Philly. I said, you need to take 2 weeks off now and then build up for the spring. So it is possible, but you really have those first 4 or 5 days are really, really critical that you don't do anything.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that. I think you touched on this in the beginning. I think people don't recognize that recovery is training. Like that's part of the training cycle. We break our bodies down, it recovers, and then we come back stronger. I mean, that's just the training cycle. So recovery is a part of training. You're actually getting stronger as you're recovering. And the marathon you're going to do tomorrow, you don't think of it as a training run, but it is the biggest training thing you can do. It's the biggest training stimulus is 1 by 26.2 miles at marathon pace. Like that's the biggest workout you can do. Then you need to recover from that. That adaptation that comes from that is going to bring you back stronger. So I think fitness loss is a little bit of a myth. Yeah, if you sat on your butt for 2 months, yeah, there might be some fitness loss, but that recovery is actually making you stronger. So I think that's really important, and it's okay to feel like what you're losing is maybe some of that neuromuscular stuff that, oh, hey, I forgot, this feels weird, I haven't run in a while, but physiologically, you're stronger after the marathon.
After my first marathon, that's the one thing nobody talked about was the recovery afterwards.
Yeah, it's so important. And even the 1 to 2 weeks there's not even a magic number. You have to know your body, and ultimately don't try to jump back in until you're recovered and ready to go. So yeah.
I was just wanted to know how strength training would play a role in a good training cycle.
Great question.
Yeah. Many of us out there do more than just run. And I think trying to put in the appropriate exercises that allow for your body to still be able to do the marathon training. So not doing too much in the gym. It's very individual. I myself do strength training. I try to put my hips and my knees and my ankles through a full range of motion under some stress other than running. It helps us stimulate human growth hormone. So when we strength train, maybe after a running session, and we're strength training the major muscle groups of the upper body, we actually get a shot of human growth hormone that targets the damaged muscle tissue, not just the muscle tissue that's in our upper body that we just worked out, but it floods the body and helps recover the legs and helps repairs tissue, south of the waist, if you will. So strength training can be important. I usually default if someone's really hyper busy throughout the week. They have work, they have a family they gotta take care of. I default to just marathon training. If they have an extra half hour here or there, they can fill that with stretching and with some weight training activities. Like even doing push-ups helps stimulate the triceps and the pecs. And those are major big muscle groups that'll help you get that human growth hormone, HGH spurt to help recover the entire body.
Oh, it's on testing. Hi. So I'm a big Dina fan, and I've met her in Fargo. I met her in Chicago. I met her in Boston, maybe. But so I used to follow her training religiously, and then I saw her drop out in the marathon of the Olympics, right? 3rd mile. She got a fracture in Beijing. Yeah. So, and then I watched her get the bronze, of course. I'm just a huge fan, and just to see you two is awesome. But I wanted to know, what would you tell the runners that are at mile 17 and you get the tears in your eyes and you want to quit? I've done about 30 marathons myself. I've never quit. I've run through injuries after injury, but if someone that, whether they're first marathon or dreaming about being in the Olympics, what would you tell them at mile 17 to get through the marathon?
So that's a great question. I ran the LA Marathon back in March, and my goal was to qualify for Boston, and I missed it by 38 seconds. I was one of those 12,000 that got eliminated. In real time, I created a mantra, and my mantra was, "This is so hard. I don't want to do this again. Keep going." Because I got to 17, 18 miles, and it was really difficult. And I repeated this mantra, keep going at the same pace, keep going. I don't want to do this again. This is really hard. So I think creating a positive mantra during the race, and that could be anything like, I want to finish. I want to see my family at the finish line. I want to get that finish line photo, whatever. You can also think about the Capitol building being a giant magnet, and the Capitol building is pulling you to the finish line. So you're using your mind to kind of play tricks with your body that you're just being drawn to the capital, and you have this big magnet on your chest, and it's just pulling you across. So there's some mental tricks that you can do. Words of encouragement, do some mental check-ins, after I think 10K, like, is this pace too fast? Is this pace too slow? And usually what I tell first-time marathoners, that if you think you're going too fast, you probably are. And that's early on. That's in the first 10K. It's like, oh, this feels a little quick. Well, then you should slow down. Even if you have a goal marathon race pace, your goal is to break 4 hours, break 3 hours, qualify for Boston, check in with yourself. If the pace feels too quick the first half, it likely is, and you want to slow down.
I also feel like you've run 30 marathons and you've never quit. You're probably more qualified to answer that question than anybody. So congratulations. Yeah.
I guess you kind of just answered my question with pacing. First marathon, I've done like 2x5 miles and like the 20-mile long runs at what I think will be my goal race pace. Do you have any recommendations? I've also looked at VDOT calculator. It was for sure not accurate. I'm not going to run a 2:55 tomorrow based on my 5K. But do you have any recommendations for just overall pacing? I know go out slower than your goal race pace. First 3 miles or so is helpful, but anything that you can say other than just the check in with yourself at 13?
Right. So a general kind of rule for everybody here, I think getting to 30K or 18.6 miles, getting to 30K comfortably, being able to hold a conversation with somebody, where you can say 1 or 2 sentences and then kind of, take in a breath, ask another question, that sort of thing, that kind of pace, that kind of effort. So getting to 30K, 18.6 miles, relatively comfortable, and then being able to stretch it out. I remember when I ran CIM in 2008, I was conversing with these 2 guys. We were trying to run 2:45, and they GPS watches were a new thing back then, and I was using an old school Timex, and I was getting my lap split each mile because the course is certified, and I trust the mile marks versus trusting my GPS watch. Always trust the race director when it comes to that. But I remember talking to these guys, and they were arguing what the pace was. And I said, well, yeah, that was a 6:15, that was a 6:18. And I think being able to get to 30K, being able to have a little bit of a chat is always a good barometer for most everybody out here, speaking to a general audience. So that would be my advice, that kind of magical number of 30K.
Especially on this course, because most of the first 18 miles is a lot of rolling hills. And if you're fighting those hills, like trying to maintain a pace rather than listening to your body and staying comfortable, you're going to really miss out on the reward of CIM, which is being able to race the last 6 to 10 miles really well because it's flat and fast. So that's really what I've never heard anybody ever say I went out too slow in a marathon. I've never heard that. Right. No one has ever said, I went too slow, I would have had a better day. So always just check down, especially on this course. And just kind of roll with the punches through the hill and really set yourself up when you get to that 18 miles to be able to say, hey, I feel pretty good. And then you can kind of start testing your limits and go out there and chase a time.
And something to keep in mind as well, most of us, I feel like train alone. And when you get into a race, I was looking at the program and there's like, how many pace groups are there? There's every
5 minutes from 2:55 all the way back. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you have all these pace groups to run with, lots of people to run with. When you run alone, you have that feedback of like, okay, I'm running my tempo run, I'm running my pace, my marathon pace run at 7:20, 8:20, whatever it is. When you're in a pack of people, you're getting about 5 to 15 seconds per mile benefit from just drafting off of 40 people in front of you. So you got to keep that in mind too, that it might look daunting. Before my wife broke the American record in 2006, we were doing her last tempo run. It was an 8-mile tempo run in Bushy Park in London. And she ran this 8-mile tempo run at 5:20 mile pace. And she's like, I don't know how in 8 days I'm going to run 26.2 miles at that pace. She wasn't factoring in the taper because your body super compensates. After you taper, you get stronger going into tomorrow. And then you also have people to run with. You have people in front of you, people behind you, people on the side of you that help pull you through as well. And you got to keep those things in mind. That I'm saying this to help lower anxiety a little bit. Like that pace is so daunting. I only did it for 10 miles in training, but that's my goal pace. Well, it's going to be a little easier for the first 30K. It's going to be a little easier for the first 30K because you have so many people to run with and experienced pace leaders taking you through that pace as well. So always keep that in mind.
All right. It's on. Sweet. So we've talked about a lot of like the training for it, the nutrition during the race. I'm curious, like your take on nutrition outside of the training. So during the week, things like that. So I used to be a real big dude. I'm not as big anymore, but like I still freak out. Like I went from the far extreme, like I can't eat carbs because I'm going to get really, really big again, to like now give me all the carbs, right? And as our body turn into a furnace, things like that. I see the scale click up and people say, don't look at the scale, but like I have to, right? Like what's the general just take that you give your athletes, like fueling during the week outside of the run, day-to-day breakfast, lunch, dinner type of thing?
I've been asked, is marathon training a weight loss program? And I say yes, actually, because you are, like you said, you're a furnace. You're burning calories all the time. Diet is very individual and sacred to a lot of people. I try not to step on that too much. I like to eat very nourishing, nutrient-dense foods. I like a great steak twice a week. I live in the mountains at 8,000 feet. I need to keep my iron levels up. Some people are vegetarian, obviously, vegan, keto, high protein. We can all get the job done, but I think that it needs to be very nutritious, nutrient-dense foods to help repair your body, staying away from the processed foods, shopping the edges of the grocery store. You know what I'm talking about? Avoiding the middle aisles when everything's in a package. All right. So I like to skirt around that question a little bit, just because diet and nutrition is sacred to a lot of different people. I get that question a lot. But for my own sake, lots of variety of foods, salmon, chicken, lean red meats, and high quality breads, and that's kind of my take on it. Yeah.
Hi, Coach.
Hi.
I just turned 60, and I was wondering if you would be giving me a similar plan to what you give these guys, or would my plan be drastically different due to my age?
I think it's really based on experience. A 60-year-old who's been running since they were in high school, high school cross country, maybe even college track and cross country. Your physiology is going to be much different. So on a coaching, on an individual, highly specific basis, I have a lot of interaction with the coach, the coaching clients that I have, the athletes I coach, and it's highly individual. So we have 30 marathons here. She's not day over 30, so she's been running a long time. It's really, really individualized based on just experience and physiology, and also goals. If someone says, "Hey, I want to run 5 marathons I want to run all marathon majors and CIM next year. That's 7 races. How are you going to train me?" I'll first say, "Why do you want to do that?" And then second, I'll say, "Okay, well, here's how I'm going to train you. It's going to be highly specific." So that's how I see it. Yeah, I wouldn't train you any different. I would train you different. Based on your individual
my goals and my
goals
lifestyle, probably. Okay, awesome. Thanks. You feel better.
I think you've covered the ground pretty well, so I'll ask you a silly question. What's your favorite running movie?
There we go.
Probably the one that motivated me in high school, and Scott might agree with me, is Running Brave. Running Brave.
Bill Mills is a Sacramento resident.
I know, Folsom, right?
Yeah.
Folsom or that area.
Fair Oaks, yeah.
Fair Oaks, thank you. Yeah, but that was my go-to in high school. Running high school cross country was Running Brave. It's a great documentary. movie on Billy Mills. Incredible story. That's my go-to.
There's a really cool one I just saw. Now I'm saying it before I can't remember the name of it. I just saw it recently. It's a Iranian movie about a kid who runs this race because he shares shoes with his sister. And they need an extra pair of shoes, and the winner wins a pair of shoes. It's the coolest movie. So if you look that up on the plot, I know I'm doing a horrible job because I can't think of the name of it, but if you plug that plot into Google or something, you'll find it. It's an awesome movie. So it's my new favorite running movie. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Let's give a round of applause for Andrew Kastor. Like I said, one of the great marathon coaches, literally written the book on marathon. He's provided his time here today to provide some great insight on best practices in marathon training, also provide you guys some advice for tomorrow. Good luck to everybody tomorrow, and we'll see you at the finish line. And remember, raise those arms up, get that great photo.
Yeah, good luck.